Good day, this is Teacher Rowan. I'll be your guide in exploring Google Apps for education, for teaching and learning. In Google for Education, teachers can connect and collaborate easily while staying on task. It gives teachers the freedom to spend more time personalizing the learning experience and less time managing it. Students can learn essential skills such as 21st century problem solving, which they can use it in their future careers. As such, the accessibility features will also help and assist every learner to do their best work. Google offers different useful applications that we can use to connect education to technology. This will help our teachers as a 21st century educators to innovate and find ways on how to make teaching and learning more exciting, engaging, effective, and flexible to the demands of the society. Let's re-explore the education experience by discovering new angles to create, collaborate, and communicate as one. Para sa bata, para sa bayan, at para sa guro. Ang pagkatuto huwag gawing komplikado. Sulong edukalidad.
Magandang araw, Sir Wilbur po, at your service. Narito ang ETUlay upang gabayan ka sa inyong pag-aaral upang lubos na maunawaan ang iba't ibang paksa o subject. Ang ETUlay ay isang free online tutorial class na pinangungunahan ng DepEd Educational Technology Unit sa pamumuno ni Undersecretary Elaine Del B. Pascua. Ang programang ito ay hindi lamang para sa mga bata, kundi ito rin ay magsisilbing gabay sa mga magulang at mga guro kung paano nila ituturo o gagabayan sa bawat asignatura ang kanilang mga anak o mga estudyante. Sa kasalukuyan, ang self-learning module mula sa rehiyon ng Calabarzon at kilala sa tawag na pivot ang ginagamit sa ating ETUlay online class. Kaya ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Ihanda na ang inyong mga ballpen o lapis, papel o kwaderno at samahan kaming itulay ang pagkatuto para sa bawat batang Pilipino. Sama-sama tayong magtutulungan para malampasan ang mga hamon sa panahong ito. Halina't matuto kasama ang inyong online tutor sa oras na ito.
Good afternoon, ETUlay learners, parents. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Before anything else, I'd like to say good afternoon to SDO Olongapo, headed by Madam Leilani Cunanan, our Schools Division Superintendent, and Madam Mylene Minimo, our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, and of course to Sir Allen Toyogon. Good afternoon, sir. Ang ating pong PSDS ng District 5B of Olongapo. And then to our EPS for English, Ma'am Loretta Figueroa. Magandang hapon po, ma'am. And then to our principal at New Cabalan Senior High School, Sir Samson S. Bukiron. Good afternoon, sir. And to our head there, Ma'am Susan Laksamana for the academic group, our Master Teacher 2, and Sir Richel Quinto, our Master Teacher 1. And likewise, I'd like to greet a good afternoon to the SDO Zambales, specifically Santa Cruz North Central Elementary School. Good afternoon po sa inyo, sa lahat ng mga nakikinig dyan. Here again is your tutor Dick for this afternoon's tutorial class for 21st century literature from the Philippines and from the world. For now, we are on our quarter 2. Yan, simula na po tayo ng quarter 2, week 6, which will be focusing on writing a close analysis and critical interpretation of literary texts, applying a reading approach. Yan po ang ating focus ngayon, our reading approaches. And in particular, we're going to use them in writing a close analysis and critical interpretation of literary text. So let us begin now. Ready your pivot module from Calabarzon 4A and your pens and papers. And here we go. So for today's tutorial, our objective will be number 1, write a close analysis and critical interpretations of literary texts using a reading approach. Yan po, we'll be employing a reading approach. For today, we'll be employing 3 reading approaches, and we're going to identify representative text from Asia and Africa. Yan po. Good afternoon po, Miss Mary Grace Bigayo Nagpaton and Julie Angelo Ramos. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Second objective for today would be, let's try our best to create or produce a creative representation of a literary text by applying multimedia skills. If you remember our previous lessons or tutorials focusing on multimedia skills. And the third one is, of course, we have to do our best to show appreciation of different represented literary texts. For today's tutorial, again, it would be from Asia and Africa. So let's have a quick recall. Let's try to answer the following questions on a piece of paper if you have your pieces of papers with you. The recall would be on the identification of the 6 elements of a short story. If you remember our last tutorial, let's ready. Let's write ourselves. What would be our first element of the short story? Setting. Ayan, napakahalaga po niyan. Setting, of course, talks about when and where the story takes place. And this usually includes place, time, weather conditions, social conditions, mood, or atmosphere. And of course, if we have setting, we also have the characters. Yan po. Characters are the actors in a story plot. They can be people, animals, or whatever the writer chooses. Okay, 2 main characters, the protagonist and the antagonist. And we also have the side characters and the little or the minor characters. Okay, example po, Little Red Riding Hood would be, the protagonist will be the Little Red Riding Hood, and antagonist, Big Bad Wolf. I'm sure you're all familiar with this one. Next would be the plot. And if we talk about plot, we should be familiar with the diagram called the Freytag pyramid. Okay? The plot is made up of exposition in the beginning, rising action, followed by the highest peak of the story, the climax, and followed by the falling action, and finally, the ending or the resolution. And of course, if we have plot, we also have conflict. Okay, the problem or struggle in the story. We have 2 kinds of conflict. We have internal and external. Internal is the character versus himself, while the external, the character versus another character, or the character versus a situation or a force of nature. And of course, we have the theme, the story's main idea, the message, or the central idea that the writer wants to convey. Okay, the theme is about life or human nature. It's not directly stated, but it must be inferred by the reader. Good afternoon, Miss Isusa Martinez. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Again, we have the element called point of view. 3 basic point of view: omniscient, the all-knowing, first person, I. Okay, tells the story and it is included in the story. And of course, we have the third person limited. Mafo-focus natin siya mamaya sa isa sa ating mga literary text, no? The narrator tells the story from just one character's perspective. Ano kaya yung ating literary text na yon? Let's talk about that. Now, for today's tutorial, we'll be focusing on the reading approaches. So every time we read a piece of story or a poem, we employ, the teachers and the learners employ these 4 major, or 3 rather, reading approaches so that we can understand more what we are reading. We can extend our knowledge about what we are trying to study from a piece of literature. If you're going to look at the cloud tag here, reading approach, can you identify the 3 reading approaches that we're going to focus for today? Anybody? Yan po, tingnan po natin yung cloud tag natin. We have, yes, we have scanning, yan, and then we have skimming. And if you can see, closer, extensive reading. So let us begin with skimming. Ayan. The first reading approach we'll be focusing on today will be skimming. Okay, in skimming, if we're going to employ this reading approach, the main idea of a text is quickly identified. So when we're reading and employing skimming, we have to identify quickly the main idea of the text. Our goal here, if we're going to employ skimming, is to read shorter text. Hindi po yung buo, no? Read shorter text to extract accurate, detailed information. That's our target. That is our goal. And then this is done at speed 3 to 4 times faster than regular reading. Now, if you're fond of regular reading, yung the usual pace, this is done 3 to 4 times faster. Mas mabilis po tayo for skimming. And this is very useful when you are seeking specific, yun po, tandaan niyo po yung word na yan, specific information rather than reading for comprehension. So ang ating pong target lamang sa skimming ay to seek specific information rather than reading comprehension. Okay, let's go to your SLMs. There is the first activity called Read Me. Now, for this one, we'll be focusing on the selection Chechnya by the author Anthony Mara, who is an American author, but he lived for a very long time in Russia. Okay, so he wrote a story, a short story entitled Chechnya. Now, Chechnya is a small part of Russia which is composed of Muslims, the Chechens. Ito po yung kanilang nation sa Russia. And unfortunately, these people or the Chechens are always at war with the Christian people of Russia, po, yung the government of Russia. So they're being considered to be rebels. So Anthony Mara wrote Chechnya for these people. So let's begin. Our instruction for this activity is we're going to fill out the table with setting and character. Makikita nyo po sa inyong SLMs. And then we'll be using skimming as a reading technique. Dito po natin gagamitin yung skimming kanina na pinag-aralan natin. Let's try, no? So, since we're going to read using skimming, we'll be using excerpts from the story itself. Okay, the first literary element that we're going to focus in, we're going to look for the specific information called setting. Again, what is setting? This is where and when the story happened. Okay, this is the first part of the short story Chechnya by Anthony Mara. Let us read. After her sister, Natasha, died, Sanja began sleeping in the hospital. All right. She returned home to wash her clothes a few days a month, but those days became fewer and fewer. No reason to return, no need to wash her clothes. She only wears hospital scrubs anyway. So let us look at the first setting here. I have highlighted the clue for that specific information or the setting that we're going to look. So from this text, we can see that what is the time? The first timeline would be after the death of her sister Natasha. There is the character Sonja. They are in the hospital. Okay? Yan po. We can see this in the first part of the story. And then to be specific with the setting, where exactly in the hospital? Okay, so we can read this after this first part. Hello po, magandang hapon po, Miss Helen Aguilar and Miss Mary Eresa Benson. Good afternoon po sa inyo and condolences po to the family. She wakes on a cot in the trauma unit. So they are in the hospital. Specifically, they are in the trauma unit. If you're familiar with the trauma, this is where the serious cases of patients go. No, yung mga emergency po with serious injuries, they are being put here first. Okay, so why could they be in a trauma unit? She sleeps there intentionally. Ito po yung dahilan, in anticipation of the next critical patients. But the question is, why would there be critical patients in this story? So that is your setting, my dear learners and parents. And then further, para mas magkaroon po tayo ng picture ng full or complete setting of the story, let us take a look at this part of the text. A minute later in the hallway, a man introduces himself. My name is Ahmed. Okay, he speaks Russian, so we know it's in Russia without an accent. But by now, Sonja or Sonia feels more comfortable conversing in Chechen. Yeah, there you go. The title, Chechnya, people there are called Chechen or Muslim Russians. A short beard descends from Ahmed's face. For a moment, she thinks he's a religious man, then remembers that most men have grown their beards out. Few shaving cream, fewer have mirrors. The war has made the country's cheeks and chins out. Okay. Again, let's go to the particular setting of the story. Particularly, we are in Chechnya, Russia. And what is the timeline? Why are they in the hospital after there is death? Because there is an ongoing war. The war between the Chechens and the Russians. Alright po? Malinaw po sana yun? Sige po, let us move on to the next literary element that we're going to focus on using skimming. The next specific information would be character. Who are the characters in the story? Okay, we're going to use again excerpts from the short story Chechnya again. Let's go back to this part, the very first one. After his sister Natasha, there you go, the first mentioned character died. Sonia, the next one, and this will be one of the main characters, began sleeping in the hospital. Okay, ito na po yun. So, makikita mo natin si Natasha and our main character, one of the main characters, Sonia. And then, if we're going to read again further down the story, makikilala naman po natin si Ahmed. Alright, the man who suddenly appeared in the story. He speaks Russian, and he is, by the way he speaks, a Chechen. Not only a Russian, but particularly a Chechen. And he is part of the war between Chechnya and Russia. Yan po si Ahmed. So we have Natasha and the main character Sonia. Now we have the next main character, Ahmed. And reading further, papakilala po ni Ahmed ang kanyang sarili. In the text itself, who is Ahmed? I was a medical student before the war. So si Ahmed po ay isang medical student. So more likely, he is a medical practitioner at this very point before the war happened. Switching to Chechen. Ayun, nag-Chechen siya. Nagsalita siya ng native Chechen. In my final year, I will work here until a home is found for the girl. Okay, so Ahmed then introduces the next character, yung kanyang kasama. Mag-work daw siya doon para sa babaeng ito. But who is this girl? Let's try to look for the text. Ito po, pakilala natin si girl. Does she speak? Sonia looks to the girl. Who is this girl? What's your name? Ahmed answers for the girl. The girl is named Havaa. So there you go. Yan po ang ating mga characters for Chechnya. Okay. We go to the not so minor character, the sister of Sonia, Natasha. Okay. If you're going to read further down the story, you can find this. 6 months earlier, Sonia's sister Natasha was repatriated. She was a refugee in Italy, and she was brought back to Chechnya. A bottle of ribavirin antiviral pills on the bathroom sink. Ito po yung character ni Natasha. If you're going to take a closer look, there are cigarette burns on Natasha's shoulders. Sonia worked on surgeries because Sonia is a nurse or a medical practitioner in the trauma unit, and Natasha worked on sleeping. So, quick information. Good afternoon, Ruben Naba. Ano po kaya ang meron kay Natasha? Is she kind of sick? Medyo po, no? Because she's taking ribavirin antiviral pills for infection, viral infection. So, more or likely, Natasha is suffering from viral infection. She has to take these pills. And she is also a war refugee. But it doesn't say in the story kung siya rin po ay isang nurse because she kept on sleeping while Sonia was working. All right? There are cigarette burns on her shoulder. Yan po ang typical na mga war refugee, no? There could be some suffering or torturing in part of Sonia. That's why in the beginning of the story, she died as part of the setting of the story. Now, let's go to the next reading approach for this afternoon. No? Aside from skimming, gumagamit din po tayo, we employ the teachers and the readers, the learners, employ scanning, okay, which is quickly reading a text, again, the word quickly reading a text to get the summary of it. So, ang target mo, you get the summary. Ang skimming, you get specific information. But this time, scanning, get the summary of what you are reading. Okay. This is shorter in terms of you are only searching for keywords or ideas. Yun po ang target natin. Kanina, text or information. But this time, you are searching for keywords or ideas. It involves moving eyes quickly down the page, seeking specific words and phrases. Okay? So yan po ang ating next reading approach. Let's try to employ this in our next activity in your SLMs. It's called Scan Me, ang ating direction. Read and understand the story. Our next story, The Journey to the River by Eva Ibotson. Yan. Okay? And then our target will be to fill out the table with point of view, conflict, and theme. Kanina po, setting and character. Ito naman po, conflict and theme. Okay? But we're going to use scanning as a reading technique. Ito po ang gagawin natin. Same thing. Our target or specific key point would be the point of view. Who is narrating the story? So we're going to get from the text itself, specific keywords and phrases. Makikita po natin, okay, This story employs a third-person limited. Bakit ko po kayo nasabi? A third-person narrator whose knowledge is limited to one character. Isang character lang po ang makikita nating binabanggit ang point of view niya sa story, either major or minor, has limited point of view. It is limited to one character with whom the story is being told through. At ang ating pong third-person limited character po niyan ay si Maya. Ayan po sa ating Journey to the River. Who is an orphan. Okay, so keywords Maya, orphan. Okay, another keyword we can extract from the short excerpt from the story is the word money. Tandaan niyo po ito, money, very important po. Magbibigay sa atin ng more meaning of the story. And of course, the words relatives. So, what comes into your mind when you see these keywords? Maya, an orphan, there is money involved, and there are relatives. Ingredients for a typical telenovela. But let's take a deeper look at the story of this one. Okay, the next literary element that we're going to find using scanning is the conflict. What is the struggle of the main character? Conflict is a struggle or problem between a character. It could be either between himself, another character, or nature, or the situation. That is the conflict. So what could be the conflict of A Journey Down the River by Eva Ibbotson? Okay, so however, let's take this part here in your SLM. However, the only reason, take note of the highlighted words, the Carters, ayan, took Maya, our main character, was her money. In reality, Gwendolyn and Beatrice are selfish. Yun, lumabas na yung ating storya. They hate Maya before they even know her. Maya feels like being with the Carters is like being in prison. Okay, soon, however, she meets Finn, another character who is running away from private detectives known as the Crows. They are trying to force Finn to return to England and claim is another keyword inheritance. Okay, so if there is money involved, there is an orphan. There are family members who are trying to take care of the orphan, and there is money and inheritance involved. Okay, ito na po ang ating magiging part ng story. Dito na po iikot ang ating story. The conflict between Maya and the Carters, no? Typical story, may orphan, may mga kamag-anak na natitira. They're after the money. So Maya versus the Carters. Specifically, Maya versus Gwendolyn and Beatrice. Yung mga nagagalit po kay Maya because of her they don't want another family member, but they are keen on getting her money. Next element, okay? Theme, okay? The specific keyword for theme, what is the idea the story is focusing on? Tingnan po natin mabuti. Yan, theme, it could be the story's main idea and the central idea of the story, or the lesson that the writer wants to convey through his words. For this short story, or an excerpt of story rather, let's take a look at this one. Maya is an orphan. Her only guardian is a lawyer named Mr. Murray, whose only responsibility is to help her with a small amount of money. Okay, if you remember Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events, parang ganito po, no? If you are familiar with that story, have left her when they died. Then Maya learned that her relatives, ayun po, pasok na po sila Carters, would be willing to take care of her. Bakit kaya? Because there is money involved. However, the only reason, ito po, lumabas po yung katotohanan, because of her money. In reality, Gwendolyn and Beatrice are really selfish. Okay, they hate Maya before they even know her. Yun po, lumabas po yung totoo. So Maya feels she is in a prison. Again, nakilala niyo si Finn, who also has his own inheritance. So, their adventure begins. Actually, yung pinagawaan po nitong story ito is an adventure story, no? By Eva Ibbotson. So, what could be our main theme? We could infer, yun po, we used inference from the keywords, money, selfish, being in prison, inheritance, and there's family. We could infer this theme. It could be love for family and friends versus or over the love for money. Ayan, no? Alin pipiliin nila ng mga characters? No, yung money ba o aalagaan nila yung family nila, or you enjoy your adventures with your friends? So that basically is where this story revolves around. Okay. The next reading approach that we're going to focus for today would be called extensive reading. From the word itself, it involves large amount of reading that includes, ito po yung mga ginagawa pag nag-extensive reading tayo. It includes foreign language learning. Yan. When we read something, we try to understand it by reading further, learning foreign languages. Okay. We also view and review unfamiliar, ito po, very common, unfamiliar words in context. And we do a lot of free reading of books and other materials, which will help us in understanding a particular piece of literature. Yan po, no? So extensive. From the reading itself, we extend to learning vocabulary, learning foreign languages, and reading everything that can help us in the understanding of a particular text. That is extensive reading for you guys. Okay? So let's try to employ this in our next piece. This time, it's from Japan. Kanina po, Africa and somewhere in Asia, Russia and Chechnya. Now we are in Japan, Asia na po tayo, East Asia. A short story rather, by Naoko Kumagai. It's entitled Shiminawa. Okay, so take a good look at the pictures that you see. It's a what? What do you make of this? It's a piece of rope. Ano kaya ang silbi nitong picture? Mamaya makikita po natin. Okay, let us have the excerpt from your SLM first. Okay, so this is a story. I take note of the highlighted text. I was told it was August 1973. My brother Jiro was 4, sitting at dinner. Itadakimasu or itadakimasu. Yan, that is the full term for that. My uncle said, so there's the uncle. Jiro picked up onigiri, a rice ball, with his hands and mashed it into his mouth. Fish and rice on his plate, untouched. He stuffed another onigiri in his mouth, bits of rice falling. Jiro-chan, a warning from my mother. Jiro opened his mouth wide, splayed his tongue covered in white beads of rice. When you splay your tongue to a person, how do you do it? Nilaan niya yung kanyang nanay. Kazuya stood up and roughly pulled Jiro out of his chair. Nung dinilaan ni Jiro ang kanyang nanay, the uncle Kazuya stood up, roughly pulled Jiro out of his chair. The next part of the story is this. What are you doing? The mother was alarmed. My mother asked, getting up. Kazuya went out to the back door, carrying Jiro firmly under his arm. With the other hand, he picked up a circle of rope. Take note of this one. A circle of rope hanging on a fence by the shed. In the yard was a large oak tree with heavy twisted branches. He wrapped the rope around my brother once, then pushed to the trunk of the oak, winding the rope around and around. Tinali ni Kazuya, the uncle, si Jiro sa oak tree using the circle of rope. Yon. He must eat his dinner properly, demanded the uncle. My uncle tied a thick knot at the end. He needs to learn to be a man. My mother was shouting at my uncle. Jiro was screaming. The sound flooding the sky. Kazuya went back to the house, relaxed and entitled, as if he had just finished a long day's work. Okay? So, by this time, ano po kaya ang nangyari sa story natin, no? There's a little bit of animosity between the mother and the uncle. Why? Because of something that the uncle did. No one remembers the rest. This is the end of the story. My mother never forgave my uncle. Nagkagalitan sila. My father wasn't there. Jiro can't recall any of it. He jokes that the incident is possibly the reason he always intuitively eats everything on his plate. Bakit kaya may pagbabago kay Jiro after the incident? So let's take a closer look at this one. No? Extend natin ang ating reading, particularly on Shiminawa by Miss Kumagay. The first question that you're going to see in your SLMs is this one. Shiminawa is a rice straw or hemp. Again, rice straw or hemp, or it is a rope. Okay, it is festooned, hung, or draped in some sacred landmark. Ginagamit po ito ng mga Hapon kapag sacred yung isang bagay and they put it around that. No? Yung Shiminawa. The short story is entitled that way because, bakit po kaya? Yan, no? So there's the rope, the Shiminawa. Okay? So let's see. The story significantly and symbolically involves, if you are going to remember what we just have read, rice, ayan po, and a circle of rope. Ayan po. It wasn't stated if it is a Shiminawa, kung yun ang nakita ng uncle niya, na kinuha niya nung galit na galit siya na kay Jiro. But This story significantly and symbolically involves rice and a circle of rope. These two are both sacred to the Japanese people, rice and that circle of rope, shiminawa. Second question, so we can extensively read and understand the story. It focuses on onigiri, may be wrapped with seaweed and could be similar to sandwich by the West. Onigiri then is a, let's take a look at the picture. Ito po yung ating mga particular or common picture of onigiri. Onigiri from the text itself is zero pickup, a rice ball. Yeah, no, rice. It's made of rice, but it's formed into a ball and usually wrapped with seaweed. Yun po yung kinakain ni Jiro at hindi niya pinapansin yung kanyang fish on the plate. Third, let's take a look at the main characters. The main characters in the story were si I, ayan, the narrator or the author. Someone is narrating. It could be the author herself. We don't know. It wasn't stated, but what we do know is he is or she is a part of the story. Kazuya or the uncle, Jiro, the small, the young brother, and of course the mother. Third, eto po. Let's take a foreign word from the story. Itadakimasu or itadakimasu. Okay, in Japanese language, is known as being at peace and accepting peacefully a command to eat. Ayan po. But in normal everyday mealtime in Japan, it's called eat your meal. No, inuutos po ito pag sila ay kakain na during meal times. The father will say, "Okay, itadakamisu," my uncle said. Okay? So, Jiro picked up onigiri, a rice ball, with his hands and mashed it into his mouth. The one telling the story was, sino kaya nagkukwento? For this fourth question, it could be the author herself, Naoko Kumagai. She's a part of the story, or another first-person narrator who is also part of the story. No? Again, itadakimasu means let us eat. Yan po. Okay, pero bakit nagalit si Jiro? Okay, number 5. Let's talk about the setting. The setting of the story was in East Asia. Specifically, the setting was in Japan because, okay, in this part, extensively, we're going to prove our answer by extracting the text to justify your answer. So, it's Japan. Particularly, it's mealtime. Tingnan po natin. There's the onigiri. This is a story I was told. Okay, ito po yung text na kinuha natin. It was August 1973. My brother Jiro. Ayon. Jiro is a particular name, Japanese name that makes us our name. That tells us that it is in Japan. Sitting at dinner. Itadakimasu or itadakimasu. Okay, it's a Japanese term. Let us eat. Okay, Jiro picked up onigiri. Yan po, a rice ball. Fish and rice, untouched, bits of rice falling. It is a mealtime. Ayan na po, ang nagpapatunay na po ito po ay nasa East Asia, particularly in Japan. 6. Asia is known for having close family ties. The family tradition being presented in the story was, ayan po, where in Asia can we find people having close family ties? Yan, aside from Japan, we have China and of course, in our own country, the Philippines. The family tradition being presented in the story, if you are going to recall what we just have read, is, there you go, what is that? Magandang hapon po, Ms. Telma Santos from Candaba East. Thank you for tuning in or being with us today. This is called the tradition of family meal time. Ayan. For the Japanese people, family meal time is very sacred. No? Makikita natin mamaya mabuti. And not only for the Japanese people, also for the Chinese and of course the Filipino people. For family meal time, it's the bonding time for the whole family in the dinner table, at the dinner table. So yun po yung ating family tradition. The 7th question would be, the story shared a specific culture in the country, our country. The culture shared was, of course, take a look at the picture. It's the reverence for, high reverence to family meal times and respect to the family head. Okay, remember your childhood days? My childhood days, one of our favorite family bonding times would be during meal times, no? And of course, we'll never eat unless our father says it's time to eat. So that's our bonding time, and of course, that is the time we show respect to the family head, that is the father and the mother, who usually serves the food. Yan po yung ating shared culture. Shout out po to Rufino A. Cruz Memorial Elementary School, Pulilan, Bulacan. Shout out po sa inyo and to you, Miss Geraldine Silvino. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Yan po. 8th question. In the story, let's read extensively again. Jiro was not eating properly. Yun po yung scenario kanina, no? Kaya nagalit si Kazuya. He stood up and roughly pulled Jiro. What Kazuya did to Jiro. So we can see in the story that he tied Jiro up to a tree. Matapos siya po siyang hugutin roughly, tinali niya si Jiro sa tree using the circle of rope. Wow. 4-year-old kid, rather, tatali ng uncle sa tree. That's how strict the uncle was, si Uncle Kazuya. Kazuya did something hard that is really hard in our own perspective. Right, the reason why Kazuya did that kind of punishment to Jiro. They are Japanese, they have high regards for family mealtime, and Kazuya, as a typical Japanese uncle, regards proper eating as sacred, and a boy must respect this by all means to be a proper man when he grows up. May pinagkatulad po ba to sa Pilipinas? Yes. No, very sacred ang ating mealtime, and you have to properly give respect to the food and to the one who prepared the food. Kaya nagalit si Kazuya, the uncle, para kasing pinaglalaroan ni Jiro yung kanyang kinakain. And that's something really, really bad for the Japanese people and even in the Filipino people. 10 years had passed. Ito na po yung ating 10th question. Jiro could not recall what happened before. Write what positive effect the incident has brought to Jiro. Was there a change after that incident 10 years after? What happened to Jiro? Tingnan natin. Jiro now intuitively eats everything in his plate as a respect for his elders and his meal and for the people who prepared the meal. Actually, that's the deeper meaning of the word itadikamasu. Yun po. A respect for the one who prepared. Even the farmers who cropped up the food, no? Sila po yung nagpatubo. Or kung ito is the fishermen, yan po ang ibig sabihin ng itadikamasu for the Japanese people. So when they say that, it's a deep reverence of respect for those who prepared and produced the food. Yan po. Not just let us eat. Okay, what can we do? No? Okay, extensive activities on your SLM, your modules. Analyze the verse and explore the content, theme, and setting message of the poem In Another World by Rasak Malik by creating a visual poem. Search for images that support that required elements of the poem. You may select in any multimedia. Dito na po tayo papasok sa ating multimedia tools that suits your skills and availability of the gadget. Depending on your teacher, grade 11 learners, you have to choose what suits your skill and your preference in terms of multimedia, no? But the most common would be, you can find this in YouTube, no? There is a particular website where you can see this, intended for Rasak Malik's poems. And this time, in another word. Rasak Malik is a Nigerian, from Africa, no? So, mapapanood niyo po ito sa YouTube. You can make use of this. And there are also radio broadcasts. Ito po, Africa Global Radio. Makikita nyo rito. Aside from visual, you can have an audio experience of the poem by Rasak Malik, no? Africa Global Radio. You can also do this. And, of course, if you want to create a blog, now using the blog as a multimedia, you can go to LitHub. There is a part there intended for African writers, and one of them would be Rasak Malik. Yan, LitHub. Yan, makikita po natin ito sa internet if you have your internet connection. So that's it, ETUlay learners. I hope na itulay natin ang ating 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world. This is your tutor Dick again. We'll see each other next Tuesday. This is me saying, keep reading, keep loving, but always keep it right. To God be the glory po, and God bless everyone. See you next Tuesday.
Sigurado ako na marami ka na namang natutuhan sa ating ETUlay tutorial session ngayong araw. Tandaan, ito ay hindi lamang para sa ating mga mag-aaral, kundi pati rin sa ating mga minamahal na guro at mga magulang na kaagapay natin para maituloy ang pagkatuto sa kabila ng nararanasang pandemya. Patuloy ding sumubaybay sa DepEd TV para sa mga araling ginawang video episodes. Mapapanood ito mula Lunes hanggang Sabado, alas 7 ng umaga hanggang alas 7 ng gabi sa inyong mga telebisyon. Abangan bukas mula 1:00 ng tanghali ang iba pang aralin sa ating ETUlay free online tutorial session sa Filipino. I-like and subscribe at manatiling nakasubaybay sa ating ETUlay tutorial session sa DepEd Edtech Unit FB page at Educational Technology Unit channel sa YouTube at sa DepEd Tayo at DepEd Philippines social media accounts. Paalam!